Yo, what's up, guys? Teacher Paul here, and today we are reacting to a request. This request comes from Whiplash, and it's an Aussie quest. Why Australia has no major cities in the north? Okay, so we're gonna learn a little bit more about Australia, and if you know the answer, let me know in the comments down below. This is from the channel Geography by Geoff. I hope I'm saying that right. And if you want to watch the video without my commentary, the link is in the description. Go check it out. Let's go straight into it. Why Australia has no major cities in the north?
Australia is a huge country, but while most of the country has at least one major city, such as Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, and even Hobart, its northern coastline does not. This is a little odd because this region is so close to the primary shipping lanes connecting to Asia. So why doesn't Australia have a major city along its northern coastline?
That is a great question, especially because it's closer also to the neighboring countries, which is interesting. Let's see.
And before anyone says Darwin is a major city, it's smaller than you probably think.
Northern Australia is different.
Australia is a continent defined by its contradictions. It's huge, but largely empty. It's surrounded by oceans, yet much...
Wait, before we even watch the video, I think I know the answer based on our Aussie viewers. It's because of the landscape. And Aussie Deb had mentioned this one time, that they normally go more south because of the... Is it because of... Well, I can't remember exactly why. Oh man, well, we're gonna find out now.
Much of its interior is bone dry. It has some of the...
Is it because of the water? Okay, let's keep going.
But largely empty. It's surrounded by oceans, yet much of its interior is bone dry. It has some of the most livable cities in the world, yet entire regions remain nearly uninhabited. Understanding the country's physical geography helps explain why Australians have chosen to live where they do, and why so few of them live along the country's northern coast. Australia is the flattest continent on Earth, lacking in towering mountain ranges or active volcanoes. Much of the interior is part of what's known as the Australian Shield, a stable and heavily eroded block of land that hasn't seen mountain building activity in hundreds of millions of years. This has left a landscape of broad plains, shallow basins, and weathered hills. And in the center lies the outback, a sweeping region of deserts and semi-arid scrubland that dominates the image most outsiders have of Australia. But surrounding this harsh core is a more varied periphery, where rainfall is more reliable and the soil somewhat more accommodating. The Great Dividing Range, which runs parallel to the east coast from Queensland down to Victoria, captures moisture from prevailing ocean winds, creating a relatively green corridor in an otherwise dry land. Major rivers like the Murray and Darling flow through this region, albeit erratically. In contrast, the northern region of Australia presents a very different face than either the outback or the fertile southern areas. It lies entirely within the tropics and is dominated by a tropical savanna climate in the west and center and a tropical monsoon climate in the northeast. Unlike the predictable seasons of the south, the north swings between extremes. Months of searing heat and heavy rainfall during the wet season, followed by long stretches of dryness during the rest of the year. And when it rains, it pours. The monsoon can flood rivers and turn dusty plains into wetlands overnight. But during the dry season, those same wetlands vanish and water becomes scarce again. The terrain of the north is equally challenging. Much of the land is flat and covered in coarse grasses and scattered trees. But
so it's very hard to live under these conditions.
Soil quality is poor, heavily leached by centuries of tropical rain. Mangrove-lined estuaries, floodplains, and escarpments add further complexity to the land. Cyclones are another hazard, regularly battering the coastlines of the Northern Territory and Northern Queensland, with destructive winds and heavy rains.
Yeah, we saw a few videos about
Northern
the cyclones.
Australia is far from lifeless. The region is home to incredible biodiversity, including some of the last large, relatively untouched tropical ecosystems in the world. This, of course, also comes with some of the most dangerous wildlife and plants that humans have ever encountered. One such plant, commonly known as the stinging tree, is so painful that victims are often in pain for months. It's considered to be the most venomous plant in the world by some metrics.
Wow.
Australia's physical geography...
No, but Australia has some unique life. whether it's plants, whether it's vegetation, whether it's animals or insects. They have like, you guys have giant stuff.
Geography is extreme, to say the least. There's a reason why it's well known for its danger. But then, so are Indonesia and Southeast Asia. So why did early British settlements focus so far away from the major colonies and trade networks of Asia? Of course, it all starts with the Aboriginals of Australia. Once again, I've ditched a sponsor for this video because I want to tell you guys all about my awesome Substack. Every week, I write additional articles that go along with my weekly videos, and it's 100% free forever and always. So go to geographicjeff.substack.com to sign up and join this rapidly growing geography community.
That was a quokka? I've never heard of a quokka.
Long before the British ever set foot on the continent, Aboriginal Australians had spent tens of thousands.
Wait, I didn't read that. Early colonists preferred the south.
Long before the British ever set foot on the continent, Aboriginal Australians had spent tens of thousands of years adapting to its diverse and often unforgiving landscapes. But rather than building cities, they lived in smaller, mobile communities that moved with the seasons and the availability of food and water.
Like
These
nomads.
patterns varied across the country, of course, and largely reflected the land itself. In the fertile southeast and along some river systems, Aboriginals could settle in place for longer periods. In the arid interior, survival required constant movement and deep environmental knowledge. Along the tropical north, communities timed their lives to the rhythms of the wet and dry seasons, adjusting their diets and their locations accordingly. Crucially, Aboriginal settlement was not organized around permanent structures, which would come to define British colonization. Instead, it was deeply rooted in a relationship with the land, shaped by Dreamtime stories, seasonal migration, and stewardship practices. The landscape wasn't something to be conquered, but rather something to be understood. This kind of land use left very little physical evidence that European explorers would recognize as civilization, even though these societies were very complex in their own ways. When the British arrived in force in 17...
The truth is the British needed people to do their work, right? Because they could have, if it was just about land, they could have gone to the north or anywhere else, but they normally they needed people. They wanted to colonize the people. They didn't want to gain power over the land. It's the people they wanted.
1988, they brought with them a fundamentally different understanding of land, settlement, and development. They were looking for harbors, farmland, fresh water, and a temperate climate, ideally all in one place. The site of Sydney on the southeast coast checked many of those boxes. It offered a sheltered harbor, manageable weather, nearby forests for timber, and space to grow food. Melbourne, further south, had fertile land along the Yarra River and a cooler climate that was more familiar to British settlers. Perth, founded on the southwest coast, and Adelaide, further along the south-central shoreline, also fit into this mold.
We need a video
These
with
cities
Aussie
became
animals.
magnets for people looking to start a new life in a new part of the world, some of whom were forced. In fact, the first settlement fleet carried 788 convicts, leading to one of the most well-known, and slightly overstated, historic facts about Australia, that it began its life as a penal colony. The early Australian colonies were largely based on logistical decisions. Settlements were placed where supply ships could safely land, where agricultural output could be maximized, and where European vision of development could be imposed with relative ease. Australia, at the time, was Britain's most remote colony, which meant that it had to be self-sustaining in ways that not even the early North American colonies had to be.
That's something... This is absolutely something I ask myself, like, how did the UK manage to find Australia so far away?
Of course, the early British colonizers were keen to settle the north as well, but those attempts rarely went smoothly. Early efforts in places like Port Essington and Raffles Bay, both on the northern coast, failed due to isolation, disease, and harsh conditions. Eventually, Darwin would take root, but it remained a small outpost, more connected to its military role and proximity to Asia.
So Darwin is the
economic
biggest
clout
city
or
in the north?
population size. Queensland, stretching up the northeast coast, did see more successful settlement, particularly in Brisbane and later Cairns and Townsville. But even these cities are located in the far southeast corner of the state, or nestled along more protected segments of coastline. The far north remained largely empty. All told, British settlement in Australia followed the path of least resistance, reinforcing the natural gradients laid down by the physical geography. The cities we know today didn't emerge randomly. They were products of environmental compatibility and colonial convenience. Settlers were not about to brave heat, malaria, flooding, and isolation when more temperate, navigable, and productive land was available elsewhere, which
Now imagine leaving the UK, which is, kind of cold weather, especially back then, and then going to Australia and seeing the heat, dude, yeah, they were like, nah, I'm not staying here. No, let's go further south where it's colder.
Which brings us to today. All of these past issues have since been solved. So why does Australia still not have any major cities in the north?
Darwin is not a major
Australia
city.
is a large country, but it's not a very populated one. In fact, as of 2025, the country is only home to about 28 million people. This would make it the 54th largest country in the world by population.
Yeah, this is something that happens with Canada, with Russia. It just comes down to terrain, doesn't it?
But because of its massive size, also a country with a very low population density, at only 3.5 people per square kilometer. Even Canada has 4.5 people per square kilometer.
Wow.
Suffice it to say, Australia's population is more condensed than most other countries. And
Wow.
this leaves vast areas of it with very few people. But one place you might expect at least one large
That's
city
beautiful.
would be along the northern coastline. Let's look at a map. The northern part of Australia is closer to Southeast Asia than Sydney or Melbourne. It's plain as day. Darwin is physically closer to Jakarta and Singapore than to Canberra, the capital of Australia. And in an era where global trade is dominated by ships moving
Lots of people don't know the capital of Australia, especially because of the Olympics that was in Sydney. So if you ask anybody, they'll definitely say, oh, Sydney. Some people will say Melbourne, but few people know Canberra.
the capital of Australia. And in an era where global trade is dominated by ships moving through the Java and South China Sea and the ports of Singapore, Hong Kong, and Shanghai, Northern Australia appears to sit in a prime location for both imports and exports, almost like a southern gateway to Asia. And yet, the North remains largely empty, dotted
why?
with small towns and isolated outposts. Why? Well, to start, it's not like the idea hasn't occurred to Australians. In fact, politicians, military planners, and economic developers have periodically floated proposals to open up the North or create a new northern capital. But despite these ambitions, no city has ever emerged on a scale even remotely comparable to Australia's southern cities. The reasons are many, and they begin, as they often
Whoa.
do in Australia,
That's
with
nice.
geography. The tropical north is one of the most climatically challenging regions of the country. The wet season brings monsoonal rains, intense humidity, and cyclones. Roads frequently wash out, rivers flood, infrastructure decays more quickly in the heat and damp. Then the dry season arrives, stretching for months, bringing dust, fire risk, and water shortages. This
Dang.
climate rhythm, while manageable for small populations or for industries like mining, makes sustained urban growth difficult. Cities require reliable infrastructure, predictable logistics, and steady access to water and energy. The North provides none of these easily. Even in 2025, the North's remoteness is a problem. It's not just distance from other Australian cities, it's distance from the infrastructure backbone of the country. There are few major highways, limited rail connections, and a thin web of utilities. Building and maintaining a city-scale system in such an environment requires enormous investment. And for what in return? The population base simply isn't there to justify it. Without people, there's no market. Without a market, there's no business case. And without a business case, there's no political will. Then there's the environment itself.
Yeah, so basically everything is against the idea of having a bigger population there, because like nobody wants to live in these conditions, which make it so much more difficult. In fact, if you're watching this from Darwin, how is it there?
Much of the land along the north coast is ecologically sensitive, home to wetlands, mangroves, and unique species. It's also home to some of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth.
Wow.
Aboriginal Australians have long
Still
lived
have
in the
them there?
north, particularly in the Arnhem Land and the Kimberley, regions that remain deeply significant
Kimberley.
in cultural and spiritual terms. Large-scale urban development would disrupt these landscapes and risk further marginalizing communities that already face a host of challenges. There's also the legal dimension. Much of the land in Northern Australia is held under forms of Aboriginal title or is subject to land rights claims. Any expansion plan would be complex, controversial, and contested. So if the North is hard to build on, distant from population centers, and environmentally delicate, what about the strategic upside? Being closer to Asia does have value. Darwin, in particular, has taken on an increasingly important role as a military hub, hosting Australia.
I also have a question about Darwin. The foreigner population, do you have a lot of Asians? Do you have a lot of Indonesians? Do you, like, how is it? Because it's so close, right?
Australian forces and rotations of U.S. Marines. Its port, controversially leased to a Chinese company in 2015 for 99 years, has become a symbol of geopolitical tensions in the Indo-Pacific. This grappling of U.S. military and Chinese economic interests highlights the strategic importance of Australia's northern region. But strategic importance doesn't automatically lead to population growth. A city can be militarily vital and still remain small. Fairbanks, Alaska, for example, is perhaps one of the most strategically important military locations for the United States. But the city has and will remain fairly small. Even economic potential has its limits. Northern Australia is rich in minerals, cattle, and gas, and has supported large-scale resource extraction for decades. But these industries don't necessarily require large cities to function. Mining towns rise and fall with commodity cycles.
I mean, you need
Workers
people.
fly in and fly out, usually on months-long cycles.
You need
Investment comes
people.
in bursts, not in steady flows. That kind of boom and bust economy doesn't build sustainable urban environments like those seen in Melbourne or Sydney. Basically, it builds camps, not cities. In the end, the logic of the South continues to dominate Australia, where about 98% of Australia's population lives. The southeast corner, in particular, with its temperate climate, deep water ports, major rivers, and large existing populations, remains the natural heart of the country. The original decisions made by early colonists to settle Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth weren't just historic accidents. They were decisions reinforced by geography, climate, and connectivity. And in the north, for all its potential, it continues to remain on the periphery, with just 2% of Australia's entire population and no major cities.
2%.
Darwin, the largest city along the northern coastline, is home to just 140,000 people. And the north as a
Wow.
whole, a little less than 600,000. In
Whoa, that is less than my hometown.
the end, geography dictated the first settlements of Australia. History cemented them in place. And now, even in an age of globalization and shifting trade routes, the inertia of those early choices keeps Australia's cities anchored far from its northern shores.
I know some of you will probably lean into the whole tropics thing for why there's no city there, but tropical cities tend to fare quite well actually in terms of population growth. Even Britain founded plenty of successful tropical cities, such as modern Singapore.
Whoa.
Australia, in this regard, is just different. Speaking of Australia, this
Yo, I'm really, look at that. We need to check out Singapore at some point as well. Singapore is beautiful, and I feel like there's a lot there too for us to watch and discover.
Australia, in this regard, is just different. Speaking of Australia, this week and the 2 weeks before it, I've been cruising around the country, from the southwest to the outback, and now Tasmania. If you want to see what Australia's geography is really like, go check out those videos on my travel channel.
I hope you enjoyed learning all about
That is so
Australia's
cool.
northern coast. If you did, why not check out this video all about why Indonesia is moving its capital and why it's
Indonesia.
a disaster. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Wait, Indonesia is moving its capital? Dang, I need to watch more of these videos. We have a very big Indonesia viewership on our channel as well. AussieDub says, we still have native Aborigines. One of my brothers lived with them for 3 months in central to Western Australia. It's pretty cool. We are the 5th generation Aboriginals and very proud of it. That's so cool. Thank you so much to Whiplash for requesting this video. And guys, don't forget to go and support Geography by Geoff in the link that is in the description. That is pretty cool. Guys, here on the channel, we react to a bunch of different stuff from different countries. We're also live on Twitch. and that was really informative. And yeah, so basically, before we watched the video, I already had an idea that it's because of water, and that's how humans do. Like, we live where it's easier to find food, water, and also where the climate is favorable. So basically, that's just a normal thing that if it's uninhabitable, then nobody's going to be there. So yeah, the North has its weather patterns and its natural disasters as well. So obviously there won't be people, and if there are not people, then there can't be, you know, big cities or major cities. But with that said, let me know if things are getting better in terms of weather, if it's getting worse. How is weather changing? Because here in the UK, I'll give you one. It's so hot. It never used to be like this. I used to live here in 2005, actually, 20 years ago, and it was cold. And in the summer, we had like 20 degrees max. Now we're getting 30, 40 degrees. That's crazy. Like 40 degrees here. I think the max last year or 2 years ago was like 40, 43, 44. I don't know. I just know that people are considering buying air conditioners for the first time in the UK, because it's every summer it's just hot now. It's crazy. But let me know if things are shifting also down under. If you guys are getting colder or hotter. I don't know. With that said, thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next video. Click over here to go over to, you know, the Australia playlist.